O kia ora tātou katoa. No whangara mai tawhiti me aitutaki ahau, ko te pari mai hana taku ingoa. Walking in the following in the footsteps of giants this afternoon, no mean feat. Really privileged to be here this afternoon. I wanted to start firstly by acknowledging the day of reflection that happened yesterday. The day of reflection for survivors of state abuse, 12th of November 2024. And I just want to share a poem that I wrote for the public apology last year. I had the privilege of putting together a book from survivor stories from across the motu. And for many of our survivors, it was the first time their voices had been heard, and so it was a very important moment in time for them. So this poem is called The Walking Shell. The blood is dry, her thirst unrelenting for love that is jarred, trapped in a time long ago. If I were to look inside that shell, what would I see? Tunnels of darkness that never end but for a flicker so hard to see. She questions her life so hidden within. Take me, love me, beat me, discard me, a crumpled mess, a heavy blow. For every smile you see, there's 1,000 reasons why not. Her soul is hard and empty, broken and sold. It's awesome that I'm here today in kind of a twofold kind of a way. So yes, as one of the directors of the Centre for Family and Sexual Violence in Pōneke, but also as a survivor of child abuse and partner violence. So my life has kind of led two streams really, one which has been about my own personal healing and my commitment over the years to breaking the cycle of violence in my own whānau. But also I've always been interested in looking up and back and thinking, if the system responded differently for me when I was a child, when I was a young wahine, what would I have wanted that system to be doing? And finding myself in positions where I could help nudge that system change over the years. It's been many years. And when I look back now, 30, 40 years in the public service and, my time in NGOs, etc., you've seen that meme or that picture of the ladders, and there's two ladders side by side, and one has like 1,000 rungs in it to get to the same place, and then another ladder has like maybe 100 rungs to get to the same height. When I look at that imagery, I always think, yep, I was on that 1,000 steps to the same height, and every year you kind of think, has anything I've done this year made a difference for our whānau? But then when you look back at the longevity of time and hear the stories today, and we know that, the work isn't over and the work will still continue, but, people are still here, people still are committed to healing the hearts of our whānau. And for me, that's what keeps me in the mahi. Whether I'm in Pōneke, whether I'm at home, whether I'm working from Wairoa, whatever it's been, that's been what's kept me going. So today I've got to talk about the national strategy, Te Aorerekura. So when I look around the room, I'm firstly wondering, does anybody know about this strategy, Te Aorerekura, 25 years to eliminate family and sexual violence in Aotearoa? So if you know a little bit about family violence, the strategy, or a lot about the strategy, can you put up your hand? I'm going to count to 10. 1, that means you know nothing. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Amazing. Now the same exercise, how does Te Aorerekura guide the work that you currently do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Awesome. And that's really amazing because the kaupapa, the vision for the strategy is to eliminate family and sexual violence in Aotearoa over a 25-year period, which we're now on the 23rd period. Can I just flick to the first slide, please? Oh, I've got the flicker. Right, that's always dangerous. That's right. Okay. When I heard that some of the kōrero this morning, people were referring to we are the solution. So the system can do so much for us, but at the end of the day, we know, I think, Tim, you just said the system will come back and bang us in the head. And Willie, you talked about us being our own solution. And when you look into the strategy, at the very first page of the strategy, there's a kōrero from Papa Hohepa Delamere, which basically says, return within, and when you arrive, gaze outwards. There you will find the true essence of Māori, of people. So really what I understand he was saying there was, we are our own answers. Look within, find your own centre, and from then the healing and the change will happen. And for me, when I saw that in this national strategy, it just really grounded everything that we're going to be working towards over the next 25 years. I also wanted to, I could talk about the strategy and all of the things, but what I wanted to, before I do that, I also want to just pull on some of the kōrero from this morning. One, I've already mentioned around finding our own solutions for healing our whānau. Two, is Crystal here? I think Chris has left. You know, the Tain Rōpū talked about this work being like a pizza, that we all have a part to play in. The work that we're currently doing for Te Aorerekura really speaks again to that. There's all those pizza parts are still all there, and we're going to be having another go at getting them all into the same place, doing the same thing in harmony. And we've talked about this afternoon as well, that kind of development and involvement of partnering with police. And that's been a really key part of our kaupapa over the last year, as we've thought about how best do we support communities in this space. So you would have seen all the Te Aorerekura pieces before, that the strategy is based on 6 shifts. The shift we're currently working on is around strengthening multi-agency responses to family violence. And why are we doing that? You know, I think, Tim, you've talked about the whole range of opportunities to heal our whānau across the family violence continuum. What we know is people, families and whānau are not getting the support they need right now in Aotearoa. 92% of people who die in family violence homicides are known to that pizza of services. This is because there's a critical there's critical gaps across the responses, inconsistent funding, no national guidance, differing understanding of risk and response. We've talked about information sharing this morning as well, and the inconsistencies of our workforce capability across the country to work in this space. We also know, I need to put my own slide deck on, sorry, because I can't read that. Just more statistics really that gives weight to the work that we know we need to be doing. So we know that only 30 to 40% of people who experience family violence are known to police, while 50 to 60% of survivors will seek help in their own communities from their own whānau, and 30% report family violence incidences to police. So an alarming 40% get no help at all in the way that the system is currently set up. And we know that 78% of survivors who access multi-agency responses come back again to the response because they don't get the support they need in the timely way that they need it. We know that it's only 2% of people that experience more than one violent episode experience 87% of all reported violence. So when you look at that statistic in itself, all of this investment is going into the system, and yet that's the stat that we still have as a country. We know that 50% of family violence call-outs are reported to have children and young people present. I think Kerry was talking about the invisibility of our tamariki in our family violence reporting, and so part of our work moving forward is making sure that we, at every point of the system, our tamariki are visible so that they're able to get the response that they need. And we know that 50% of adult victims don't ask anybody for help. So, you know, if there's a reason for the national strategy to exist, those are some of the real alarming situation that we have in our country. So when we had to put together our second action plan for Te Aorerekura, we did a review of all of the 44 SAMS tables across the country. And this was some of the high-level findings that we found out from across those 44 sites, tables, whatever communities are calling them. So 62% of those sites didn't have a governance group supporting them. 40% of the sites had no systemic risk assessment happening. Only 57% of the sites used the FSS police information sharing system, and 62% of the sites had no regular reporting to a governance group. So we thought, okay, if you look at those stats that I just shared and you look at the current state of our multi-agency responses, we needed to do some work to strengthen the system, to support communities and government agencies to strengthen the system. Oh, I haven't turned the... And, you know, Laurie O'Reilly talked about everyone has a piece of the jigsaw, but no one has the full picture, which I think is kind of what you guys were alluding to in terms of using the pizza as the metaphor. So this is the work that we've been doing across the country to start to help to strengthen multi-agency responses across the country. When I talk about multi-agency responses, I am talking about government agencies, because we know that government agencies fail our whānau, and we know that the model has been police-led, and we know that that response isn't working for every community in every part of our country. So we've been working across 12 regions, Tairāwhiti being one, to look at your local conditions and work with you to identify what parts of your system you want to prioritise to strengthen. We've been developing a nationally consistent protocol that will have a nationally consistent way of operating, but you'll be able to adopt it and adapt it into your own local ways of working. We've been piloting some specialist outreach work in Manawatiti, which is Auckland's Central, and Rotorua, which really is making sure that there's a practice specialist leading the response in partnership with iwi in their community. Oranga Tamariki have been involved in the fast track pilots. I'm not sure if Tairāwhiti has a fast track model operating. Min, I don't think so. Is Flora still here? No. And we're looking at developing the new information system that will replace eventually the FFS police system. So I just might move on from here. And so what we learned from all of the review that we did was that there's actually 6 core components that communities need to be able to really deliver a solid, integrated response to family and sexual violence, or to family violence in its first instance. One is around effective governance and leadership. One is around making sure that the investment is targeted and going in the right places. So, you know, building on some of the thoughts you were having this morning in the community commissioning section, that there's a quality improvement, continuous improvement approach happening formally within communities, that you're able to build on your collaborative ways of working, that there's a consistent way of assessing risk, and that you have the right specialist capability in that assessment team as well, and that I mentioned earlier that child and victim survivor responses are in place all across the country, particularly including the visibility of our young people. And so what we've learnt so far, working in Tairāwhiti, Kahungunu and other regions across the country, I was going to read from my notes again, sorry. Yeah, so what we've learnt is multi-agency responses require some sort of a backbone function, because at the moment a lot of the work is led out of police, and a lot of the investment goes into police. And you will remember, I think it was the beginning of this year, where police started to talk about wanting to remove themselves from being front and centre in the family violence response space. They want to be able to get back to their core business, which is about making safe, not doing the ongoing support work around that referral. So this kind of helps to shape the collective ownership of multi-agency responses moving forward. I've talked a little bit already about the response in relation to tamariki and rangatahi requiring strengthening, and I've talked about the high-risk protocol as well. Jane and the team have been involved in contributing to the development of the risk assessment protocol. We really have to get better at understanding what the gap is for between nationally funded services in an area and the local accessibility of these services. I'm sort of mindful of a situation we had in Auckland where the MSD was the MSD at the time. They were saying, we put all this money into Auckland, and Auckland was saying, well, we don't have those services. What services are you talking about? Turns out the contracts hadn't been reviewed for 20 years, and so those providers that had initially been contracted to do that work, life had moved on, boundaries had changed, all of those sorts of things. And so, once again, central government's thinking that something is happening and that's not the local understanding at all. I've talked a bit around the pathway needing to be beyond police, and so what is the appetite for communities to take over the ownership of the multi-agency response, collective response in your area? And I think Jane and the team are going to be talking next around the work that they're doing. In order for community and iwi to step into that space, there has to be a real change and there has to be a real understanding of what that would mean in terms of local accountability. Mandate, and currently that kind of sits loosely within police, and it's everybody's business and nobody's business. So that's the kind of policy work that's happening in Wellington as we speak, to try to make sure that the accountabilities are going to be right for iwi and communities moving forward. The next point really speaks to the role that government agencies should continue to have in multi-agency responses when they become iwi or community owned. And that doesn't mean that government agencies don't get to participate anymore. We still need to be available with the right supports when community need government agencies to step in and do the things that they need to be doing. So MSD is a good example. Don't want to pick on MSD, but immediate accommodation benefit, immediate travel assistance. Sometimes when you've got a wahine that needs to get away immediately, it can take days, a week, for all of the system to chunk into gear so that that money is available for her to be able to leave town, whatever the scenario might be. So this is about strengthening the way government agencies work in response as well. The next thing there, and I've talked a little bit about the technology support that's required as well. And then, I sort of don't want to really be talking about the local barriers and the system change, because I know you guys have been working on that forever, and there continues to be a lid jammed tight. I kind of use that kind of analogy of those white buckets with the lid that you find your TT in or whatever, and trying to get the lid off those buckets. You have to really wrangle it. That's kind of what wrangling regional barriers up to central Wellington is like. That lid just never moves. And so, we've just got to keep trying to loosen that lid and get it right off so that we can start to work on some of those big, gnarly system barriers. So that's probably a bit of an overview of the work that we have learnt across the country over the past 12 months. Oh, gosh. And this slide here, it's not the whole slide, which is amazing because I wasn't going to talk to it anyway. But what has been developed is a new operating model for multi-agency responses, which will strengthen all of the issues that I've talked about previously. And we were intending to keep rolling out across the country, doing our system improvement plans, which Jane and the team have been working on. And then the Prime Minister went down to Christchurch and visited a model down there, which is ISR Canterbury, which works really well for their community. The other thing about ISR Canterbury, it's the most heavily invested in model in the country, and they've been going for about 8 years. So it works for Christchurch, Kate Pai. He came back to us and said, I want those models all across the country. And so we really had to push back and say, hey, Prime Minister, yep, it works for Christchurch, but we also know we've got some amazing community and iwi ways of working out across the country as well. So we want to be able to give you some information and then get into some implementation in those regions as well. So we managed to kind of win that one. And what that looks like for Tairāwhiti is an offer for Tairāwhiti and Kahungunu actually, so the whole of that East Coast area to be the first tranche to prototype this new operating model with us, which then helps inform the wider rollout across the country. So I've been talking with various people over the last week around that, and Manaaki Tairāwhiti agreed to kind of move to the next stage yesterday, so we're excited about that. I won't go into any of this detail. I'm available to talk about it after this if you'd like to. But basically what the prototype will look like in a nutshell is setting up we're calling it a hub and spoke model, Wellington language, but basically it's a regional back office, so regional Tairāwhiti back office, and strengthening your service delivery mechanisms around the work. And some practice improvements. It's an operating model of 6 practice steps to strengthen the way of working. We're working closely with the Taiwater Hub to make sure that this is aligned to your way of working and you're able to adopt any other things that you think is going to work for your local response. I guess the important thing for this hui is to know that it is the Centre's commitment to shifting the model to community and iwi-led and partnering with police as a part of the whole response model, not them leading the response model moving forward. And the second bullet point really also talks to the Centre for Family Violence and Sexual Violence partnering with the Social Investment Agency to make sure that we're staying aligned to their kind of development pathways, and also to make sure that this family violence work can have as much strategic impact as it can for your broader community commissioning framework that you agree on as a community. And then also, how does all this get funded? What's the current funding that's coming into this response model, and how might that look different moving forward? So there's some mapping that we'll have to do through the prototype as well. And then all of these amazing things will happen in the future, but I'm not going to talk through those because it's the afternoon and it's getting warm. But in a nutshell, that's kind of where the strategy has landed, and this is the work that we'll be doing over the next 12 months in Tairāwhiti and across Kahungunu as well. And this is the phasing of the work.